Intro to Magnus Verdox, 1420, City of Taraz. Chapter 5, Merchants of Taraz. Magnus and his 13 hulking Norse warriors, in weather-worn garments and creaking heavy armor, stood out in dramatic contrast to the bright tinkling sounds of white marble fountains and the delicately patterned Persian tiled dome that arched above them. Magnus drew up his 7-foot iron and leather-wrapped frame and studied the elaborately clad palace guards that warded the intricate filigreed gilded doors to the audience chamber of the Sultan of Taraz. The elaborate geometric symbols layered in deep-rubbed gold seemed alien to Magnus's barbaric sensibilities as they swam in the shifting multicolored glow cast from the hanging lanterns that adorned the vaulted chamber. In the tense moments awaiting the Sultan's audience, he could not keep his weary thoughts from drifting to the heavy dark-stained oak doors of his own long house, crudely carved with the great northern deeds of his father and his people. Magnus frowned under his thick, bristling, gray-streaked black beard as he was reminded again of how far he was away from his Nordic homeland. A bell chimed, and a small man, wrapped in a long red robe with a tall white hat, hurried into the space between the guards. Bowing deeply, the diminutive man paused and with some difficulty spoke in a barely understandable northern dialect. "Welcome! I am the Grand Vizier, the enlightened Ulugh Beg, sovereign ruler of the great Mahavarian kingdom, and the Sultan of Tarazar grants you audience." "About damn time," grumbled Boldar Olson. Magnus gave the burly red-haired brute a withering stare, which quickly silenced any other mutterings from his men. Clearly not understanding the brute's remark, the Grand Vizier waited, looking up with a questioning stare. Magnus simply nodded in response to the look and strode forward, pushing through the opening door, brushing the small man aside. Magnus and his men had already been in Taraz for weeks now. Arriving earlier that month, he and his men had been hard-pressed by the swift-talking, turban-headed Tazarian merchants who desired the quick exchange of the Norseman's precious gold for the rare white silks and delicate porcelain his queen had sent him halfway around the world to acquire. For many days, Magnus had waited for the caravan to arrive. As the days grew to weeks, Magnus had more frequently found himself in the merchants' district, inquiring as to the date of the caravan's arrival. Akbar el-Sharif, chief merchant among the great caravan masters, was incensed by Magnus's insistent requests concerning the delivery of their goods. In time, the discussions turned dark, and Sharif would often refuse to meet with Magnus, and when he did, the talks often ended in insulting, guttural, desert-tongued curses. Finally, the relentless heat and the stinking arid city with its strange customs had been too much. Magnus's patience had finally snapped when Akbar hurled a drink into his face in a fit of frustration. To the merchant's astonishment, the giant barbarian leapt from his seat and fired a torrent of lightning-quick sledgehammer blows into the surrounding faces of Akbar's reeling men. Thrashing bodies were hurled in every direction as Magnus's Nordic berserker violence tore through the merchant's shop like a raging bull. In mere moments, only the labored breathing of the hulking Norseman filled the room. Surrounded by half a dozen broken and bruised bodies, Magnus turned to the shocked Sharif. The Norseman's 7-foot frame slowly straightened in the flickering light of the spilled and sputtering braziers. His massive chest heaved under the stone-white rune-covered armor. Rope-like tendons twisted on his bulging forearms as he clenched and unclenched his ham-sized fists. Ice-blue eyes blazed out beneath sweat-plastered locks of thick black hair. The quivering Akbar fearfully backed toward the wall, twisting his robes in nervous handfuls. Magnus's lips curled into a murderous grin, and Sharif began to whine and mutter pleas to his prophet. Magnus stalked his way toward the shaking merchant, impudently kicking aside the heavy desk separating them, hurling stacks of books and parchments into the cowering man. Please, please, whatever you want, the merchant pleaded in his native tongue. Magnus reached out a mighty hand and wrapped it around the trembling merchant's scrawny neck, slowly squeezing until the man's skin paled and his eyes bulged. The swarthy Persian's small hands worked futilely at the iron fingers locked around his constricting windpipe as the scent of fear and urine filled the air. Magnus forcefully butted his head into Akbar's, causing the back of the straining merchant's skull to sickeningly grind into the cold stone of the wall. Nose to nose, the Norseman's deep azure eyes bored into the quickly gazing caravan master's sight. No more games. I want a meeting with whoever is in charge of the caravan, even if it's the Sultan himself, whispered Magnus. Do you understand? He questioned through gritted teeth. Akbar's own mouth worked like a fish out of water as he mouthed the silent yes. And then suddenly, eyes rolling back in his head, he went limp, passing into unconsciousness. Magnus released the body that slowly sagged to a heap on the flagstone floor as he strode from the room without a backward glance.